After the flight of Sputnik in 1957 shocked the world, the United States formed a new organization called NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and began with a simple goal: place the first human being into space. But this immediately opened up a question. Who do they choose? What kind of man would be required for such a mission? NASA had planned to hold an open competition, reaching out to stuntmen, drag racers, gymnasts, acrobats, all down the line of people who put their bodies on the line to push beyond the normal limits of human endurance. And this made sense. But President Dwight D. Eisenhower had different ideas. He insisted they all be military test pilots, not just because of duty and loyalty, but experience with high-powered jet aircraft, especially unproven craft still in development. Additional qualifications included height and weight, no taller than 5'11", or 180 centimeters, and no heavier than 180 pounds, or 82 kilograms, under 40 years of age at the time of selection, possess a bachelor's degree or higher in the applicable fields, and at least 1,500 hours of flight time and proficiency in jet aircraft. After some of the most exhaustive physical and mental examinations ever done to the human body, NASA would announce its selection for the Mercury 7 on April 9, 1959, in a special press conference. But they did not appear before the cameras as military men, all instead dressed in civilian clothes, appearing before the audience as mature, middle-class Americans, family men all. Navy pilot Malcolm Scott Carpenter, Air Force pilot Leroy Gordon Cooper, Jr., Marine Corps pilot John Herschel Glenn, Jr., Air Force pilot Virgil Ivan Grissom, known as Gus, Navy pilot Walter Marty Sherrod, Jr., Navy pilot Alan Bartlett Shepard, Jr., and finally Air Force pilot Donald Kent Slayton, known as Deke. The seven admittedly found themselves unprepared, as many of the questions asked regarded their personal lives rather than military experience or specifics on the flight. They quickly became aware that what the nation was looking for were American heroes and role models during a time when the country desperately needed both. And nobody understood that more than Glenn, who was already a national figure at the time, having set the coast-to-coast supersonic flight record, and seemed to have a natural rapport with the press. I would like to take this moment to conduct portions of that press conference, starting with the question of how the astronauts' wives and children feel about the program.
They're all as enthusiastic about the program as I am.
Yes, mine have. Mine are very enthusiastic also. I can answer the same for myself.
I don't think any of us could really go on with something like this if we didn't have pretty good backing at home, really. My wife's attitude toward this has been the same as it has been all along through all my flying, that if it's what I want to do and she's behind it and the kids are too, 100%.
Well, my wife feels the same way, or of course I couldn't be here. She's with me all the way, and the boys are too little to realize what's going on yet, but I'm sure they feel the same way.
My wife has agreed that professional opinions are mine, career is mine, but we also have to have a family life that we like, and this is part of the agreement. I can't say much for my youngest daughter. She's only 18 months, but my son does have quite an interest in the program.
I have no problems at home. My family's in complete agreement.
Well, I can't add anything to what the other gentleman said. What I do is pretty much my business, professional-wise, and my wife normally goes along with it 100%.
Once receiving the news of being selected for Project Mercury, what were their family's reaction to this news?
Well, there was never any question in my mind about volunteering. It was just, could I get in on the program? But when I said something to my wife, what she thought about my volunteering, she says, well, do you even have to ask? That's all I wanted to.
Well, to go way back when the first information of this program came out, when every one of us, you as well as us sitting right here, were ignorant about the whole thing, I can recall my own reaction, what a bunch of idiots. And my wife felt the same way. Now, this takes a little education. I had to be educated too. I think that's what we're trying to do to you today, is to educate you to the fact that we're not playing games. This is serious business. And you can't just face up to this thing and say, we're going to, as Mr. Donlan said, put $1 million in a can and fire it into space. It's nothing like that at all. You don't make a program out of something as crude as that. This is a professional program. We're trying to do something with it. And most people who have asked me, why are you in this idiotic program? I immediately say, if you'll take a little bit of time to think about it, to study it, you realize that this is something that we're very serious about.
In answer to the question about my wife's original reaction, I believe I indicated earlier she was in complete support of my professional decision. She is now and has been at all times.
Personally, my wife isn't too concerned about what I do professionally. I think she's more concerned about whether she can find a babysitter and whether there's a commissary nearby to buy groceries and this sort of thing. And whether I'm in this program or running a filling station wouldn't concern her too much, as long as we had everything else we needed.
My wife's enthusiasm has matched mine throughout the program. As a matter of fact, when I was notified that I was to be considered during the second and third phases of the competitive program, I was at sea at this time, and so my wife called Washington and volunteered for me.
Good show. Said I was at sea at the time, so my wife called Washington and volunteered for me.
What can I say after that one?
That's literally out.
That's the best of the bunch. I've never had any problem so far as my wife going along with my career. My wife is also a pilot and is quite sympathetic to my desires on flying, and particularly to this program, quite enthusiastic.
Well, my wife made a remark the other day, I've been out of this world for a long time, I might as well go on out there. I think all the wives, or at least my wife, when they first hear of something like this, they have reservations about it because they don't know anything about it. It's like all of us. We first hear of something like this, you're very interested, but you sure want to find out a lot more about it before you're willing to place your neck way out there. And I think that's the way all of us have been. I think probably what would best describe my wife's reaction has been that as she has learned more about the program, as I have gone through subsequent phases of it, and as she has learned more about it along with me, that she has become as enthusiastic about it as I am. I don't remember any deathless prose, though, as her initial reaction on this when we first started talking about it. It was one of those things that you just come home and start talking about like anything else.
And tell us a little about the medical tests that the selection process required, and which of these tests were the toughest, or, shall we say, least enjoyable?
That's a real tough one, because we had some pretty good tests, but I think the tests out at Dr. Lovelace's place at Albuquerque out there, certainly some of the tests we had out there were the most trying. And it's rather difficult to pick one, because if you figure how many openings there are on the human body and how far you can go in any one of them.
You gave it away.
Now you answer which one would be the toughest for you. All right.
I think he's answered for all of us.
Yeah. Well, that was the toughest one for me.
Well, I think it would be very difficult to pick any one. I think he answered it very well there.
They're all of many different types. I believe that the ones that involved extended effort, like the treadmill and the bicycle, are certainly the most fatiguing.
Well, I'll switch directions from John. The one I had the most difficulty with was swallowing that rubber tube for the stomach, whatever they're doing down there. Swallowing a rubber tube for gastric analysis, I believe it is.
Well, I think John Glenn answered the question pretty well. To perhaps carry it a little bit further. The tests at the Loveless Clinic and also those in Dayton actually complemented each other. And almost every test they devised was strenuous in one way or another.
At any point did the thought of spaceflight occur before ever hearing about NASA or Project Mercury?
I've been at the Flight Test Center for the last 4 years, and we have numerous writers out there off and on interviewing X-15 pilots and so forth. And the last time Martin Caden was out there, which was about 3 to 4 months ago, he asked me this same question as to whether I would like to be the first man in space. And this was before I'd ever heard of Project Mercury, of course. And I told him at that time that I would give my left arm to be the first man in space. I think that's the best way I can answer your question.
I think I can answer that simply. All of us in this room probably have read comic strips such as Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, Jules Verne routines, and if we had interest in reading things like this, obviously we had intentions of following something like this in our lifetimes. I will readily admit that I didn't think it was coming this soon. But in flying aircraft, we've been striving to get higher and higher. You've heard of releases on airplanes such as the Lockheed 104 and the Navy Grumman F-11F that have gone to quite high altitudes. Space, to any one of us, really begins at about 22 to 25,000 feet. We can't live without survival equipment. So we really are in space. We've been flying in space as far as our environment goes for many years. But as far as going higher, that's just one more step.
Well, I'm just going to say yes, and for a long time. Been much interested.
I've been much interested for a long time, too. I think of a specific example, though, in direct answer to your question of where I really felt this desire or this inclination to really get into space flight. We did considerable work, or we're doing some work, when I was back at the test center at Patuxent down here, Naval Air Test Center, on zoom flight work, where you're getting up all the speed you can and trying to optimize your flight path for getting the maximum altitude out of an airplane on the zoom climb. And on that, I don't think I ever made a zoom climb on the airplane, and I didn't have a feeling of, boy, if I just had some more power to bloop this thing on out a little bit. So I think to give you a specific answer on a period like that is when I have really felt I would want to go on out, and I've been interested in it for a long time.
Yes, I have too. I've entertained thoughts for some years of possibilities of space flight.
Yes and yes.
And when asked who was confident in NASA and ready to fly in space, all 7 eagerly raised their hands, to the delight of the onlooking press. These men were indeed ready to go, and would go on to make history, every single one of them. And the American public would not soon forget the moment in which their heroes were first revealed to the world, a moment that forever shaped this week in space history.